Hey everyone, I'm Mast, and this is my showcase for my first official Skyrim mod, Simple Race Overhaul, or SRO for short. This mod adds unique abilities to Skyrim's playable races and is somewhat of a middle ground between popular race overhauls such as Aetherius by Simon Magus and Imperius by Anision. This mod is also script-free. SRO adds 3 unique passive abilities to each race, including NPCs. If you're like me, you either dislike or potentially just forget to use your daily racial power in vanilla Skyrim, so I decided to scrap racial powers altogether. Instead, I've distributed passive abilities to give each race a unique playstyle without the need to press any additional buttons or keep track of any cooldowns. I've also modified the base stats and skill bonuses of each race to make them feel more unique. Each race gets a plus 15 total bonus to their stats, so with the vanilla stat total of 300 that's split between health, magicka, and stamina, it's now been increased to 315. However, races can also now start with less than 100 of a stat, which then frees up those points to be distributed elsewhere. For example, Nords only start with 85 magicka now, but they also start with 120 health and 110 stamina. So let's get into the showcase, starting with the Argonians. Argonians start with a pretty balanced stat distribution, allowing them to easily flex into a variety of playstyles. I've adjusted their starting skills a bit from vanilla to give them a boost to their stealth combat. Unlike the other 9 races, which start with 3 abilities, Argonians start with 5. That's because I wanted to give Argonians their basic abilities of water breathing and disease resistance from both the game and lore, but I didn't want to nerf them or make them feel less interesting to play. So with that in mind, their first ability, Histborn, grants them 100% resistance to both disease and poisons. However, it is worth keeping in mind that without a mod to undo it, they will be capped at 85%, just like in vanilla Skyrim. Their second ability, Amphibious, allows them to breathe underwater and move 50% faster while swimming. Both of these first 2 abilities won't typically stand out too much in gameplay, so I thought it was only fair for Argonians to receive another 3 abilities more in line with the other races. Their third ability, Tough Skin, increases their armor rating by 100. This ability applies with and without armor, making Argonians noticeably tankier. Their fourth ability, Lurker, increases the effectiveness of their sneaking by 15% and increases their sneak attack damage by 25%. This ability is very helpful for assassin playstyles. And finally, their fifth ability, Hisskin, increases their health regeneration by 1% of their max HP per second, and it's increased to 2% when swimming. This boost to natural regen is stronger than it looks on paper, and it can make a big difference in drawn-out fights and when healing up in between fights. It's also worth noting that Argonians start with 10 unarmed damage rather than the typical 4. This is just a hidden vanilla Skyrim stat and not something that I've added in, but it's worth keeping in mind. Bretons are a magic-focused race and have taken a small hit to their health and their stamina in exchange for additional magicka. Their starting skills have been slightly tweaked to make them more magically inclined. Their first ability, Elemental Resilience, grants them 20% resistance to all types of magic. Their second ability, Elven Remnants, increases their magic regeneration by 50%. And their third ability, Magical Instincts, reduces their spell cost by 10%. With these abilities, Bretons excel at frequently casting spells without having to wait a long time for their magicka to recover. Their increased magic resistance is also very nice for battling other mages. Dark Elves, or Dunmer, have had their magicka and stamina increased at the cost of a small hit to their health bar. Their skills have been slightly altered to match their new abilities. Their first ability, Ashborn, grants them 30% fire resistance and increases their fire damage by 15%. Their second ability, Enchanter, increases the effectiveness of their enchanting by 15%. And their third ability, Child of Azura, increases the damage of both their spells and attacks by 10% from dusk until dawn, aka 9 PM to 5 AM in-game time. Dark Elves excel as fire mages or spellblades, especially during the night when their third ability is active. Their second ability also allows them to create more powerful enchants than any other race in Skyrim. High Elves, or Altmer, have taken a hit to their health and their stamina in exchange for the highest starting magicka of all 3 races, which is accentuated even further by their first ability. I've very slightly tweaked their starting skills, swapping out their major skill of Illusion for Conjuration. Their first ability, Ancient Reserves, increases their magicka by 50. Their second ability, Arcane Wisdom, increases the power of their spells by 10% and the duration of their spells by 20%. And their third ability, Gifted Reader, grants them 1 extra skill level when reading from a skill book. Between their massive pool of starting magicka and the increased potency of their spells, High Elves excel at upfront spellcasting, quickly dishing out spells at the start of the fight. However, it's worth keeping in mind that without the right enchantments, their large magicka bar will also take a long time to refill. As the most knowledge-driven race, they also get a nice boost when reading skill books. Imperials are the most versatile race and as such have received a simple +5 boost to each of their stats. Their starting skills have been modified to emphasize speechcraft and the various crafting skills. Their first ability, Versatile, increases their health, magicka, and stamina by 15 each. Their second ability, Likeable, increases their speechcraft by 10 and reduces the cost of bribes by 50%. And their third ability, Haggling, reduces buying prices by 10% and raises selling prices by 10%. Imperial's increased starting stats make it easy to flex into a variety of playstyles. Their improved prices and crafting skills also make them exceptional merchants and craftsmen. Although it's subtle, bribes also feel like a much more viable option now that they cost significantly less money, especially with the huge starting boost to your speechcraft skill. Khajiit now have the highest starting stamina of any race in exchange for a hit to their starting magicka. Their starting skills have been slightly tweaked to make them more melee oriented. Their first ability, Padded Feet, makes their movement completely silent, although you will still be able to hear your own footsteps in-game. Their second ability, Agile, increases their movement speed by 10%. And their third ability, Balanced, increases their stamina by 30 and reduces the cost of their power attacks by 20%. Khajiit also still have their vanilla power of Night Eye for anybody who actually uses night vision in Skyrim. Similar to Argonians, as mentioned before, Khajiit start with 10 unarmed damage rather than 4, which again is just a hidden stat from vanilla. I've removed their vanilla Claws ability, which granted them an additional 12 on top of that, which gave them 22 starting unarmed damage. Their unarmed attacks did about 3 times the damage of an iron sword at level 1 in vanilla, so now they deal a much more reasonable amount. Their new abilities give them the best movement out of any race, and their silent footsteps are a lot more powerful than you might think. As long as you stay out of sight, you can now sneak up behind enemies even at level 1, since there won't be any sound to catch their attention, which makes Khajiit incredible melee assassins. Nords have had their magicka reduced, but their health and stamina has been significantly increased. Their starting skills are mostly the same, but they're now more proficient with heavy armor in exchange for smithing. Their first ability, Warm-Blooded, grants them 30% resistance to frost. Their second ability, Muscular, increases their power attack damage by 25% and their carry weight by 50%. And their third ability, Call of the Voice, reduces their shout cooldowns by 20%. Nords can deal massive damage with the new boost to their power attack damage, and the reduced shout cooldowns make them an excellent choice for any Dragonborn focused playthroughs. I've toned down their frost resistance quite a bit compared to vanilla because it was ridiculous, but it still makes them significantly tankier against frost magic. This change is also nice for anybody on a Frost Mage playthrough, since one of the major deterrents for Frost Magic in vanilla was how frequently you'd be dealing only half damage to any Nords you might run into. Orcs, or Orsimer, similar to Nords, received a boost to their health and their stamina in exchange for magicka, but with more of an emphasis on stamina than Nords. Their starting skills have been adjusted to make them stand out as the premier smiths of Skyrim, while also giving them proficiency in light armor should they choose to wear it. Their first ability, Frenzy, increases their weapon damage by 3% for every 10% of missing health. Their second ability, Blood-Soaked, increases their health regeneration by 0.5% of their max HP per second for every 20% of missing health. And their third ability, Craftsman, increases the effectiveness of their weapon and armor tempering by 15%. Orcs gain increasing benefits as their health gets low, empowering them in difficult fights. It might seem a little bit weird on paper that their first two abilities somewhat offset each other, but it feels natural in game. I didn't want people to feel like they needed to go out of their way to try and cheese Frenzy as hard as possible, so Blood-Soaked helps regenerate you back out of those low health thresholds rather than you trying to intentionally stay there. You will still feel a big reward from taking damage in fights as long as you don't let yourself die to a surprising amount of burst damage, and Orcs are also now the best race for smithing in Skyrim. Redguards have taken a small hit to their magicka in exchange for slightly more health and a decent boost to their stamina. Their skills have been slightly tweaked to accommodate the light armor that they typically wear. Their first ability, Endurance, increases their stamina regeneration by 50%. Their second ability, Fortitude, improves the effectiveness of their blocking by 15% and it increases the damage of their bashes by 50%. Their third ability, Soldier, increases their weapon damage by 5% and their armor rating by 10%. Redguards now excel at their common sword and shield playstyle, and their improved stamina regeneration makes it much easier to power attack and bash more frequently. Their improved damage and armor also helps make them excellent fighters. And last but not least, we have the Wood Elves, or Bosmer. Wood Elves have the lowest starting health of any race, but they make up for it with a significant boost to magicka and stamina. Their starting skills have been tweaked to have less of a thief playstyle and more of a mage playstyle. Their first ability, Hunter, increases the effectiveness of their sneaking by 30% and their sneak attack damage by 50%, but only while outdoors. Their second ability, Nimble, increases their attack speed by 10%, which includes bows. And their third ability, Alchemist, increases the effectiveness of potions and poisons that they create by 15%. Wood Elves now are not only the best archers, but they're also generally geared for the outdoors. While Argonians may be more effective assassins in dungeons and caves, Wood Elves receive significantly more benefits while outside. Their Alchemist ability pairs naturally with this for picking ingredients while on the road and brewing potions or poisons. Their second ability also gives them a nice damage boost to melee weapons and bows alike by increasing the frequency of their attacks. That does it for the showcase, but before I wrap up, there are a few things worth mentioning. For now, this mod comes in 3 versions. The standard version, which does everything as I've outlined so far in this video, the no stat changes version, which leaves every race with its vanilla starting stats of 100 magicka, health, and stamina, although of course any changes from abilities will still apply. And the Masterim no offsets version, which you should probably ignore for now, as it's just the version that I'll be using in the mod list that I'm currently working on. At a technical level, every vanilla race starts with 50 of each stat, and then the player is given an additional 50 to reach 100. NPCs then receive various offsets, either lowering or raising their stats, which is why level 1 bandits start at 35 HP, even though the player starts at 100 HP. The Masterim no offsets version of the mod will remove the vanilla plus 50 boost to the player, and instead distribute that plus 50 to each race to make up for it. For example, player stats would be the same as the standard version, but bandits of each race would now start with 50 more of each stat, keeping their stats more in line with those of the player. The next mods that I'll be working on will rework damage, armor, and stats across Skyrim, so downloading this Masterim version before these are out will probably feel out of place, but you can still give it a shot if you want to. It's also worth noting that health changes to NPCs in the standard version will stand out much more in the early game for the reasons I just listed. A level 1 Wood Elf bandit would start with 20 HP, while a level 1 Nord bandit would start with 55 HP. This issue basically goes away at the next level of Bandit Outlaws, because they receive an absurd health boost because vanilla Skyrim stat distribution basically makes no sense, which is why I'm working on those other mods to begin with. So for anybody bothered by the difference in stats between races of level 1 NPCs, or for anybody bothered by any other stat changes, I'd recommend the no stat changes version, or at least recommend it while I keep developing these next few mods. Also, and this goes for all mods, not just mine, make sure to read the mod page for instructions and for load order. This mod doesn't have any requirements other than the base game and the special edition DLCs, but it is important that you load it after any other mods that change the race or player file, otherwise you won't get these changes. Also keep in mind that race overhauls like this don't play well with being added or removed mid-save. Because this mod is script free, it shouldn't break anything, but if you do add it mid-save, it should add new abilities on top of whatever you previously had, and if you remove it mid-save, some of the stat changes such as resistances will still remain on your character. So thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one.
I've been seeking for the glory, say my name. And I've been trying to write my own story in the search for fame. I'm sitting here in this empty room, walls keep tumbling down.